Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I am so excited for this video because these are my go-to lazy sourdough recipes. This first one is a discard recipe, so technically it's using yeast, and in my opinion that's not technically a full sourdough recipe, but the other two recipes do use active sourdough starter. I wanted to include this one because I make it almost on a weekly basis, and so it still deserves a spot. So this one is a sourdough discard sandwich loaf. I will link all of the recipes in the description below, but this one has water, active yeast, sourdough discard, salted butter, flour, sugar or honey, and then salt. So I'm the type of person who hates measuring cups. It's just a waste of dishes for me, and I hate doing dishes in general. I always use my scale if I can. If a recipe lets me, I'm using my scale. I'm also changing this recipe by putting in freshly milled flour along with regular all-purpose flour, just because it adds more nutrients and we just prefer the taste that way as well. I love this recipe because it's the perfect sandwich type of bread in my opinion. If you're from Utah, then it's a lot like the Grandma Sycamore bread, except for not as gummy. That makes sense. So for all of these recipes, I am using my bread maker. I love my bread maker. I'll also link that in the description. So this is later throughout the day. I let this sit as long as humanly possible. However, do not let it sit in the actual container in the bread maker because it will explode. So move it over to like a bowl or something, then I'll shape it an hour before, let it rise one more time. I don't let it rise too much because then it becomes a ginormous mushroom when I bake it, but I brush it with butter before baking. I like to check the temperature of my bread. It's just a simple way to tell if it's done or not without pulling it out and knocking on it and stuff. So once it reaches 200 or above, I have never had doughy bread if the temperature has hit 200. For this bread, or really any type of bread, I like to, except for the artisan sourdough loaves, I like to brush it with a little bit more butter, and then I like to cover it with a towel because then it keeps the crust really soft. We aren't crunchy crust type people. So this is how I just let it cool. So you'll see like I brushed it with butter, but I didn't want the top to like soak through the towel that I put over, so I just tipped it on its side for a while and then came back and tipped it back over and put the towel back on to let it keep cooling down. Okay, this next recipe is something I have kept in our house like on hand for at least going on maybe 2 years now. We love these muffins. They remind me a lot of the Costco chocolate muffins, but not as like sickly sweet. And for this recipe, you want to mix it all the night before, leave it in your fridge overnight. The recipe does say you can use active or discard since you're using other leavens. I like to use active because they get really fluffy the next morning. This recipe has flour, cocoa powder, baking soda, salt, sourdough starter. Avocado oil is the one on the actual recipe. I never have avocado oil on hand because it's way too expensive, so I just use olive oil, and it's never like affected the flavor for us because I have used avocado in the past and there's really hardly any difference. Sugar, eggs, sour cream. I never use sour cream. I always use Greek yogurt. Vanilla extract, milk, which I use oat milk, and chocolate chips. And then I just stick this in the fridge overnight and then handle the rest tomorrow morning. I never add the chocolate chips the night before. I just feel that it doesn't like get as fluffy and it just weighs down the batter. A lot of the times I'll make mini muffins for Tiny. That way she can have 1 to 2, or I can put them on the side of something else for a snack. And then to store these, I like to make sure they're completely cool, and then I put them in a bag. I like to suck out the air as much as possible, and then I just pop these in my freezer. And then to reheat them, you just let them sit out until the snack, and then I like to air fry them because then they taste just like they came out of the oven, and it's perfect every time. This is a must try if you try any recipe. So this next recipe is sourdough bagels. These are also something that I make very, very, very frequently. It's pretty rare that I don't have bagels ready for us because it's a big breakfast item for us. So these do use active sourdough starter. I'm using my bread machine again. These have water starter, honey, flour. In this recipe I did alter the flour and use some freshly milled as well. So this recipe I did a little bit different because I started this in the morning when usually I'd start it at night. So they did come out differently than I would prefer. This is just how I did it this day, and it's not my favorite. I just make them at night and let them sit. It's way better. Okay, this is the bagel dough later on that day. I definitely think I over fermented this day because I don't usually do this. Usually it's much thicker and not as sticky. So if I have a stickier dough to work with, I like to fill up a thing of water next to me. I just filled up the bread maker and I dip my hands in between working with pieces of dough. Then I just went ahead and boiled them next. I like to barely boil mine because Tiny cannot chew through super thick chewy skin, and so I do 15 seconds on each side, which is well under what the recipe says. So as you can see, they didn't turn out as big and tall as I usually would have them, but they're still well tall enough to be able to cut into. So the way that I store these bagels, once they had cooled down, for the most part, I was so tired, and so I just put a paper towel at the top of the bag to collect all the condensation, and then the morning after I just wipe down the plastic bag. Yeah, these are like super chewy. So that was it for today's video. I have loved making these types of videos just because they're really easy for me to share like some of my favorite things recipe wise. So yeah, that's some of our favorite recipes for the lazy sourdough girl that I am. I don't do the extravagant things that are usually done. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and I will see you guys again next week. Bye!